welcome to our new revamped version of The Download. Today is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023, during the octave of Easter, so a blessed Easter to you. I'm Michael Voris here with my two co-hosts, Simon Rafe and Christine Niles. Feels like old times, guys.
It does, yes.
And
7 years older and wiser, I hope.
7 years, of course, and wiser. Joining us today as our guest host is Brad Eli. And today we're going to be talking about economics. Some of the finer points of economics might seem complicated and abstract. They make your eyes glaze over. But as you can see, inflation, you can see that with your own eyes every time you go to the gas station or the supermarket. But inflation isn't the only problem we're dealing with. As a matter of fact, it's just really a symptom. Could the U.S. economy go from bad to worse? We're going to be answering that question later in the show. But first, I'm going to be talking with one of our reporters, Nick Wiley, about the financial crisis. Hey, Nick, what's happening out there?
Hey, Mike, how's it going? So a couple of weeks back, I was able to interview financial expert Dr. Kirk Elliott. He's been very plugged in with what's going on with all these banking crises and how it's really kind of more part of a more sinister scheme. Of course, the interview that I did, it's on the YouTube and on the website, but I want to play a little snippet here for our conversation today.
I think we're going to have more inflation. I think they're going to continue to raise rates, and it gets worse and worse and worse. So now they've eroded people's confidence in their own economy. They've eroded people's confidence in the banking system. So now what? Now when central bank digital currency comes in like this knight on a shiny white horse and coming in to save the day, right? People are going to say, sweet, I don't care what freedoms it costs me, just fix it. I need to feed my family. I need to heat my house. I need to cool my house. What's behind central bank digital currency is complete command and control, fascist type control over your bank account.
So guys, it's really about the power. The central bank digital currency push is very real, and it's actually nearly here. It'll be our next big fight for privacy in this world.
Yeah, this is a little scary. You remember during the COVID shutdown and protests up in Ottawa in Canada, remember this, that they, what did Trudeau do? He just went into those protesters' bank accounts and froze their money so that governments would never do something like this. That's not they do things like this whenever they feel like it, actually.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're setting up, Mike. Just last year, Pippa Hallgrim, the doctor who is an economist who was financial advisor to, I think, President Bush, actually, she came out at a World Economic Forum event, and she basically said that, yeah, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting, and we're going to introduce a new one. It means digital. It means having an almost perfect record of every single transaction that takes place in the economy. So they want to see everything.
That alone is a frightening thing. I thought like a few times, like you're just driving down the street here in Detroit and you see a homeless guy sitting there, and you generally don't deal with cash anymore. If you have anything, it's just a little, like a few pennies or something. The idea of a cashless society, though, controlled by the government, which of course it would be, that has an awful lot of horrible implications.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at right now. Coming in July, FedNow starts. You can look up FedNow. It's going to be this way of the Federal Reserve being the middleman in all of these transactions, whether it's person to person, institution to institution, whatever it is. FedNow is going to be there. And I don't know about you guys, but it's presented as this way of making things more convenient, quicker.
It always is.
Yeah, so I've never had a government agency that's made anything quicker or more convenient for me. But that's what they're saying. They're saying everything will be instantaneous and it'll just be a money transfer. And it's going to start out that way is what it seems, is it'll be, the money we have now, but just instantly transferred. But it's going to be a way for the government to introduce their own form of currency.
But Nick, I just want to interject here. I think it's important that we look at the example of China, because China has already done this. China has introduced its own digital yuan just in September. And as we know, China is completely totalitarian. I mean, they've got the social credit system over there, which Biden is trying to bring over here now. During COVID, China used that as an excuse to expand its power so that, I don't know if people saw this, but I was seeing these Twitter clips of these poor Chinese people. You've got to have a phone app now showing who has been tested for COVID, who hasn't. And if you have not been tested, it's either yellow which means you have to go get tested, or red. And that automatically allows the government to shut down your access to your own apartment, to pharmacies, to stores, like complete and total control. And they claimed, oh, this is to help the population. But I don't know if you remember this, there was a big uprising in one of the factories because the government automatically switched their phone app from green to red. It has nothing to do with COVID or health. It's control. And that's exactly what this digital yuan is going to be about. It's control. And that's what Biden is trying to bring here.
Yeah, so just recently we had Governor Kristi Noem. She went out and she vetoed a bill they were trying to pass through South Dakota, and basically it was over 100 pages. They introduced it very quick, and they lied about what was really in it. So most people just went ahead and passed it. They're like, oh yeah, we're just re-upping our same financial standards. But she actually read the bill, and she's like, wow, it changed the definition of currency to exclude all ulterior forms of currency. So all the Bitcoin was gone, all those alternatives, they would be banned, and it would pave the way for the government to create their own coins for this central bank digital currency. So she vetoed that, but she also said there's like 20 other states right now who are seeking similar kinds of legislation.
Yeah, and also we've got countries already out there like Algeria, Liberia, and various other countries that have already banned Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Why? Because they can't control it. It's decentralized. They don't have control, and so they've banned it completely.
Yeah, and there's that big attack here, Nick, from Biden administration really kind of going after the whole world of Bitcoin. I mean, this was just making news a couple weeks ago. Can something like this pass its way through Congress? Is it? This is sort of a murky world. All of this finance stuff. I mean, that's why we're going to be breaking it down today. It's like, what is the impact for us? You hear all this all the time, the dollar crashing, the economy, another Great Depression. What's going on exactly? But when evil people, remember, these people kill children wholesale. When evil people have control of your money, and more importantly, your access to your money, bad things are going to happen.
Yeah, this is something that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is running for president as a Democrat against Joe Biden, he's met a few tweets, just long tweets breaking down what this means. That's one of the things he points out, is that these bankers are actually teaming up, trying to sabotage the current cryptocurrencies in order to where people have to be dependent on the government currencies. So whenever they try to make this switch, people have no alternative. It's just like, your dollar's gone, so this is what we have for you, take it. And so yeah, that's what they're doing. It's not exactly there yet, but they're getting there. It comes in July, and that's what's going to start right then and there. And they're just going to keep testing the waters, seeing how much they can get away with until you're just left with no choice.
Yeah, it's very scary. Nick, thanks very much for chatting with us and keeping us updated on it. Thank you very much. Guys, this is, I think that people have to understand the backdrop all of this is happening against. All these little moves are happening with the possibility, the talk of the possibility that the American dollar is going to be dropped as the world's reserve currency. Now, depending on which economist you talk to, Forbes just released an article, you take World War III for that to happen. But Elon Musk is the one who sort of got this entire discussion going, saying, hey, American foreign policy is being degraded greatly by the whole Russia-Ukraine war and our just backing against Russia, backing Ukraine against Russia. And what that has done is formed this alliance between Russia and China. And they're going around the world now, shaking hands with all of our other enemies. And there's this sort of anti-American bloc forming, so much so that France came out and said, hey, let's drop the American dollar as the reserve currency. Europe.
Well, I think what you've kind of got to look at is, I know that you said, that economics is kind of this opaque and somewhat complicated thing, but let's go into sort of like historical geopolitics just to make it really complicated on the opening episode of the download. So what we're actually looking at is, since the end of World War II, we kind of had a unipolar world. Where, yes, fine, there was the great Cold War thing, and it was like, it was the West, it was NATO, but really that was in practical terms. After a few years, that just became the United States versus the Warsaw Pact, versus the Soviet Union, and these two behemoths banging against each other. But as Ronald Reagan himself said, the economic power of the United States compared to the Soviet Union was always so much greater. And so it was very much a unipolar world. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the breakup, a very much a unipolar world. Prior to that, in the period, in the interwar period, we'd actually got the problem of the fall of the Pax Britannica, where for 100 years since the end of the Napoleonic Wars until the beginning of World War I, it was a unipolar world with the British Empire. Then we have the rise of the nation states, where you've got this multipolar world. Prior to the rise of the British Empire, it's a multipolar world. You can keep going back and you leapfrogging these things.
Sure.
What we're potentially looking at is we're looking now for the move to a multipolar world where there may be multiple reserve currencies, where many people are holding reserves in US dollars, but also many people are holding reserves in yuan or euros or something else or some other thing that they make. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to be some grave economic disaster, but it's certainly going to change the ease of access of money that America and Americans have had for many years.
Yeah, that's the great fear here, is that when nations trade in U.S. dollars, they don't have confidence in their own economy, their own currency, so they're borrowing and using and reserving, storing up warehouses full of American dollars because they believe, rightfully, at least in the years past, the American economy is strong, it's a world leader, blah, blah, blah. And all. You're kind of betting there's a psychological thing going on here as well. You start to see that a country weakens, and we've talked about this a lot here in the last 2 months. That Wall Street Journal poll, all the values that used to keep America great in Americans' minds. This is one of the lowest periods right now of an American sense of patriotism or anything that we ever run across. Other nations, Russia, China, see that as a weakness. They smell blood in the water. What does that mean for us? Could the dollar collapse as the world currency? Right now, it's like, well, that's really kind of, unlikely. However, it's not impossible. Can the perception begin to erode the rest of the world's confidence in America? Yes.
Well, it already is.
There's 2 points right there. Supply and demand, which we already talked about. If everybody dumps the dollar, then there's a lot of those dollars come home and those dollars are less worthless. That's economics 101. But the trust issue, what Michael was talking about, was actually something even more important. And that trust issue here is not just leaving $80 billion of military gear on this floor in Afghanistan. It actually has to do with real numbers already racked up. The U.S. debt, just go to the U.S. debt clock, and all the numbers are right there. Everything was ripped off right from there, okay? Full disclosure. U.S. debt clock sits at $32 trillion government debt, okay? $32 trillion of which we have to pay on every time that those interest rates rise. That's another, oh my gosh, we have to finance that debt. Now, if you put in corporate and personal debt, you're at $95 trillion. That's big T, okay?
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
if we just a couple more numbers here, the trade deficit was $1 trillion right now, $1.1 trillion. If we didn't have that trade deficit, like made all our oil at home or all our wheat at home and all this stuff, we could care less about what the world says our currency is worth, because we're all trading our own greenbacks. But when you're at $1 trillion trade deficit, now you really care what that's about. And that confidence right there, what if the government default? Well, they could never default. Okay, well, you're going to do it with profit. Our GDP is tanking 133% debt over GDP, so we're not doing so well. We got a lot of debt and we're not making much money right now. So we're not really going to pay it off with profit. And well, what about we borrow it? Not a lot of people out there were saying or want the dollar anymore. We don't want the bonds, because every time you raise interest rates, you crash the old bond market that was before you, so no one wants those bonds. And so therefore you got to print it. Well, now you just took a little piece of everybody's dollar out there that they had. So however you look at it right now, if those interest rates go to 15%, our $5 trillion revenue that we're spending, the federal revenue that they have each year, would all go just to service the debt. So, and those debts, remember that interest rate during Carter, just coming out of Carter era, was 81, went up to close to 21%. For whatever reason, it went up to 21, and it went up fast to there. So we have that trust issues right there. Those trust issues are huge.
And Christine, look, you're talking about inflation. Inflation is not, this pen just increased in its value by $10. It's that the dollar you're using to buy it decreased in value, and now instead of taking 1, I need 10. This intrinsic worth didn't change. So you're going to the supermarket. It isn't that the price of eggs has gone up, it's that the value of your dollar has gone down.
Yeah, inflation is actually very simple.
Yeah.
It's if you're printing off trillions and trillions of new dollars, you're just making money out of thin air,
right,
then naturally the current value of your current dollar is just going to go down. I mean, it's just as simple, like economics. You have more of something, then the value goes down. For instance, the reason that diamonds are so expensive is because they're precious, they're rare, they're hard to find. But let's say everybody could find diamonds in their backyard, then they'd be reduced to almost nothing. It's very simple.
Well, so this is an interesting point. So on the subject of diamonds, here you go. The Kimberly Diamond Company, who were like one of the people who first broke this open, there was this whole, I will call it a conspiracy theory, lest I get sued by Kimberly. But there is a conspiracy theory that Kimberly and the other diamond manufacturers artificially suppress the supply, that diamonds are actually much more common than you think. They artificially suppress them. That's the supply and demand thing. So the supply is very low. The demand for diamonds pushed forward by people like De Beers and so forth is very high. But that's obviously a little kind of conspiracy theory. People, why aren't millennials buying diamonds? There's a whole bunch of reasons. But people aren't buying diamonds on the regular basis. People are buying eggs. People are buying food. People are buying these things. Yes, there's a lot more dollars chasing those things, but now with the supply chain issues, which were caused by COVID and all the lockdowns, which have been caused by geopolitical tensions in various areas, right now, China is, by the time you watch this, China may have invaded Taiwan. It's entirely possible. But China is making saber-rattling noises across the Taiwan Strait there, looking to do that. That's where huge numbers of semiconductors come from. Everything's got a semiconductor in. This cup has a semiconductor in. So you don't have the supply for things like cars and durable goods and all these kind of things. As well, with the issue in Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine, we're not trading with Russia anymore because of the sanctions. We're not trading with Ukraine because apparently they're getting bombed, which is very unpleasant for them. These two countries are the ones producing a load of wheat, a load of natural gas, other fuels, fertilizer. Even if we, America, are not importing them, other countries are having to. It's raising the prices because the supply has gone down. So yeah, we've kind of got this perfect storm for inflation at this point. A lot of the inflation isn't explained by economic issues. Again, it's geopolitics.
When you look at China, China is going around the world right now, shaking hands, kissing babies, saying, oh, we don't need the dollar. Come join over here. They sat down and essentially crafted a peace accord between Saudi Arabia and Iran, like the Shiite and Sunni Muslims that hate each other's guts. I mean, you've got to imagine that part of that talk would say, you guys need to just shake hands and kiss babies here for a little bit because we're going to get the great Satan here. We're going to weaken the one that you both hate. You hate each other, but, my friend's enemy, whatever that thing is, that's it. China's going around doing this. They're going globe-trotting all over the place.
The Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a huge, interesting thing. So they're calling it the Belt and Road Initiative, which I think within the Chinese language, we need B here because he will be able to explain it, but kind of within the Chinese language, that actually sort of refers to something really quite profound to them. But also it harkens to this notion of the Silk Road, which was, of course, this great trade network in centuries past. And China is going around and investing in infrastructure all across Eurasia and Africa. Yeah, they are doing, putting in ports and they're putting in massive rail networks and all this sort of stuff. They're lending them money to do it. They're providing them the technical expertise to do it. And then when these countries can't pay it back because of whatever, the Chinese are just writing the debt off. They're just writing the debt off because they know this is going to help us because it's this soft power diplomacy that China is using at this point.
You think the relationship between China and the United States. The United States is still the world's leading economic power, but boy, is that gap narrowing. It's $24 trillion is the net worth, so to speak, or the gross everything of the United States economy. Number one, far and away. Right on our heels, however, is China at $18 trillion. That was not the case in 2000. When George Mitchell, Democratic senator from Maine, and Joe Biden, Democratic senator from Delaware, pushed through that legislation to give most favored nation trade status to China, they exploded. They are catching up fast. And these little deals they're making all over the place. It's like playing Monopoly. You sit around with family and friends, you play Monopoly, you go, hey, I'll do this. Let's trade boardwalk for this or whatever, and you're doing this, you start building hotels and everything. Eventually you win. You win the game because you're the aggressive one. And China right now is as aggressive as hell.
Well, Beijing, Biden, and Clinton built up the industry.
Sure they did.
I gave our industry all the way to China. And if you do history, you guys are talking about history right there, whoever wins a war, basically, who has the industrial complex, who can make stuff And basically we taught China how to make everything. So, you know, if you're going to a war and all of our factories close down, those are the factories that all get revamped to go ahead and make bombs and guns and boots and whatever else you got. So, you know, that's why the North beat the South, was because of the whole industry there.
Yeah, I was going to.
But when we're talking about Afghanistan, China rolls in and gets all the lithium. Well, what's Beijing Biden saying? I want all the cars electric. What do you got to use for a battery? Lithium.
Right.
Well, they have all the lithium. You're talking about all the commodities that these people have. 25% of the wheat comes from Russia and China. All the lithium is now coming from China. So
These countries are stocked with natural resources.
and what do we have? We have a service industry.
Yeah, you can go
well,
and
we
get a
don't
nice
need services anymore.
Nice
You
restaurant.
recall, I mean, whatever you think of Trump, I mean, Trump never would have allowed this to happen under his watch. If you remember, he was trying very hard to get industries and manufacturing jobs back to Americans and away from China. And then you get Biden in, he just completely reverses that.
That's exactly the solution. What you just said right there, getting everybody back, is the only solution. You can't tell other people what our dollar is going to be worth across the globe, but you can get jobs back in America. And if you don't do that, there is no other solution. You got to be self-sufficient. People out there, self-sufficient on your own. Countries abroad, you know, we need to be self-sufficient back here. And that's exactly the solution Trump would have employed. Drill your own oil. We actually were self-sufficient with our own oil.
We were exporting oil.
We became an exporter. I think, though, there's a very interesting thing that you actually bring up there, Brad, about this idea of let's bring jobs of any kind back to the United States. Because obviously we see the jobs report every month, and it's never as good as we might hope. And of course, you know, there's always this fear and concern in the current economic environment of, you know, my job and my friends' jobs and so forth. But what there is there's a dignity in work. There's a spiritual dignity in work. So when we talked about, with COVID, remember the COVID lockdowns, and they were extending all of the unemployment payments, and they were providing various payments and this benefit and that benefit and so forth, because people could not go to work because they were locked down and shut down and everything. But
there was no work.
There was no work. But there is a dignity in work, which the church has always recognized. And I think that that's another important thing. If America is to recover those principles and positions and beliefs and moral foundations that was it Wall Street Journal poll, I think it was.
Yes, Wall Street Journal, yeah.
They had, it's a great poll. It was terrifying, but it's really very good.
Religion in the gutter, patriotism in the gutter,
all these things.
Working in the gutter.
Family, all these
all
things.
Of it.
I think, though, one of the foundations for that is to actually give people the dignity of work again, which would involve, let's actually have jobs here that are fulfilling. And to be honest, let's have jobs that can be done by somebody without a four-year college degree. You know, so we're not just a pure service industry.
This presumes that people would actually want to go to work.
Right, a lot of people are not going to work.
Well,
and also, you know, the Biden administration right now, that's not really their priority. Their priority right now is sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. That's their priority. It's not, let's help the people who aren't without jobs here in the United States. Let's build up our infrastructure instead of sending billions of dollars, you know, to Ukraine. It's completely ridiculous. But back to the whole inflation thing. My son is in the process of looking at various colleges, and we went to one of those like come and see days at a local university, and it was the science department, because he's very good at that. And I think he's the chair of the department, got up there. he teaches thermodynamics and things like that. And then he just made this side comment about how, you know, if I were president, I would force every single politician to sit in and take my course so they could understand that something can never come from nothing. Because if you remember, under the American plan in 2021, Biden, you know, the Democrats pushed through. It was like, how much was it? Like
2.1 trillion.
Or 1.9 trillion, dollars for COVID relief. And all of us got a lot of, fat checks, some of us more because we had children, thinking, oh, well, yeah, it's nice in the beginning, but what you're not seeing is down the road, this is going to hurt you because of the inflation. And it is. We're seeing how prices have increased at the most conservative level, 13%, but more like 16%. And then the increase in salaries is not catching up to that. So the loss, like the average loss of annual income for families is $4,200. So we're losing. And this ticks me off absolutely, because as people know, I have a family, and I see the price of milk go up. I see the price of eggs. All of this, it has a real world impact such that I have to limit now how much milk I can buy for my children. I have to limit how much they can drink. I have to actually tell them, okay, we have to limit how much we drink to this amount. all that sort of thing.
It's interesting, though. So very interesting thing. Because we've kind of ragged on Joe Biden for what he did with China. I'm going to rag on Joe Biden with what he did in Delaware. So, no, this is actually a very interesting thing. So we were talking about the whole situation of the money that the government gave us, and it was this whole idea of this is a stimulus for the economy to try and carry people through. Same way, I'm sure you remember, shortly after 9/11, there was actually a little bit of a stimulus to get out there, and it was saying, hey, the best thing we can do is people to go out there and shop, which actually and George Bush kind of got it in the neck on that one, but it's actually true. If you keep the money moving, you keep people doing this, you don't just sit there and hide. The problem is that so much of that money that was given in the COVID stimulus, the individual stimulus, did not go to being spent on stuff. It went to paying off credit card debt.
Right.
And
just went to the banks.
It went to the banks. It went to paying off credit card debt. This is where it comes in with Biden. Biden, senator from Delaware, big lobbyist and so forth for the credit card companies.
Absolutely.
In order all of
They're
this
all
stuff,
in Delaware.
Because they're in Delaware because of the rules and regulations.
Right.
So a big thing for that. What we've actually had, again, to come back to a spiritual question, people are living beyond their means. People are utilizing credit cards because the money was, it's kind of strange to say money was cheap, but money was cheap because the interest rates were very, very low. You could go into a bank, you could get a credit card, you could just buy whatever you wanted. It wasn't real money, it was like funny money. It's like, I want the new washing machine, I want this new computer, I want this thing, I want that, I want the other. And it just sat on the plastic and you didn't have to think about it, which again, that I think is a spiritual irresponsibility that politicians like Joe Biden and the bankers that he supported have allowed to happen. I think really America, Catholics need to focus very much on getting away from that spiritual maturity of free money.
When you think about bringing this down to, what does all this mean? We've gone through a bunch of numbers, bunch of data. You have to, and again, it is a bit eye-glazing, so apologies to people sitting at home going, what's all of that? Here's the point, that in an economy that is built on certain foundations, that you're constantly spending. The consumer spending is always increasing. Consumer confidence is always going up. Manufacturing is happening. All that stuff. When those start to shake underneath and they start to crumble, and particularly when you've got a world stage anxious to overthrow you, they are sick of America, for rightly, wrongly, whatever. They're sick of America. They want to blow up America. Get rid of it. Get rid of it as a world power. China is aggressively on the heels here. How does all this impact you sitting at home? Well, the news is not good. Remember the Roaring '20s ended with the crash. The stock market crash. My father was actually born on the first day. Many people don't realize there was an octave of the Great Depression. The stock market crashed every day for 8 days, well, minus the weekend. And it just collapsed. Now, there's obviously different forces at play now than there were then, but nonetheless, there are new forces at play. And if anybody thinks that can't happen here, when you get somebody like Elon Musk saying, hey, watch out, so what does this mean? It's not to unduly alarm and scare and frighten people, but, you've got some pretty big names saying, the dollar is not going to be the world's reserve currency. What's the effect of it? Tucker Carlson did a big thing on this a week or two ago. Elon Musk was tweeting it out. Another economist was tweeting it out. You heard the economist that Nick said there, they're just trying to they don't care about the economy. The powers that be, the world elites, the World Economic Forum, they don't care about the economy. They want it to crash so they can move to this new model. And what happens then? This is very frightening stuff.
And also, at this point, it's dropped. The global reserve currency has dropped to its lowest point in 25 years. It's 58% right now. Just to put everything in perspective for people out there who don't know very much about this. I myself didn't know very much about this, but I did some research. Just historically, after World War II, as we've already mentioned, it was the highest. It was almost 90% in global, foreign currency reserves. Under Carter, it went down to our low point, which is about 45%. It started to come up again, and then the euro was introduced. It stopped our climb, but now it's going back down,
right.
And it doesn't look like it's going to be 50. And just to give it perspective, the next reserve currency, after that is the euro. That's down at 20%, and then after that, it's I think it's the yuan, which is maybe only 5%. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a very big deal.
I think there's a lot of things. I would kind of take a slightly more positive look, because I am taking a longer look, looking at the flip back and forth between unipolar and multipolar worlds. And I think we are moving into a multipolar world. And in a multipolar world, it can be quite nice and it can be fine, and there's no...
That's wonderful, as long as you weren't the existing superpower.
Well, look,
you're the one that's going to take it.
So on the subject, you said, people hate America rightly or wrongly. Look, I love America. I'm the only person here who actually chose to come here. But the issue with America is China is not some liberal woke thing. China is not down with this whole tranny malarkey, okay? Dylan Mulvaney would not be, sponsoring Tsingtao beer in China. He would not be doing that. He would be, I don't know what he would be, but it wouldn't be pleasant.
Probably be in a prison.
He would, at best, they're not down with that.
On a good day.
They're not down with that. They're not down with all the homosexual kind of stuff. Many of these countries, Russia is really not down with this whole idea of abortion and so forth, because they're wanting to build up their population, all this kind of stuff.
Heck, they're paying people to have
exactly.
babies.
So what America is exporting, we've spoken about this on the old download, about the cultural imperialism of America. They're exporting all of this woke garbage, which has increased massively, at which point it's like, arguably, many of these countries are wanting to dethrone America, not for economic reasons, not because we want to be powerful, not because we want to control Taiwan or the South China Sea or anything like that. It's like, we just don't want your tranny malarkey up in my face.
Yeah, we went to Nigeria in 2011. And the whole sort of Catholic population there, which was about half of Nigeria, a little slightly less than, it was about 40%. They were constantly saying that they're trapped in this poverty because of the corruption of their government, the normal people. But the other thing is that the way that they see, whether it's true or not, to get out of all of that was to take these American dollars that are being loaned. Well, Obama money came with the chains of you have to accept homosexuality.
Yeah, it's wrapped in the rainbow flag.
Same thing in the Philippines when we were there. I mean, all over the world. And if you go to a poor country, that's it. You can't do this. You can't accept this money unless you take all of that with it, and they don't want to take it with it.
And now China...
So now all of a sudden China is saying, hey, here's a bunch of money, and you don't have to become transsexual to get it.
Yeah, and they're totally down with that
if you take a 30,000-foot view here, if you read the Old Testament, Jewish people sinned, the Jewish people were punished. And how was it punished? They were the people of God, chosen people, and God, chastises those He loves. So the idea that you're punished by war, famine, plague. Well, we had our plague, right? COVID. We're having our war probably brewing pretty quickly right now, and then the famine, which is the supply chains coming down. We haven't even talked about like colonial pipeline hack and all this. What if the supply chains actually get hacked and come down? Like one hack, colonial pipeline. If people don't remember, Google colonial pipeline hack. 17 states immediately said, we have a state of emergency, we have no gas in this state. And that was just one hack. They paid off $5 million and it started flowing again, but that was never solved. So anyway, throw a few more black pills on the table. What happens though is that what you're exactly talking about. We have failed culturally, from religion on down through politics, and downstream of that is culture, and so we're at that last car to pile up, right? And to cycle that back, where do all the politicians come from? Where do all the priests come from? They come from families that have been failed families. Contracepting couples, now LGBT, and now transgender, right? So it doesn't stop. And now we're supposed to fix it with those broken families going back. It's just like really a hard lift. So you get to that point where God says, okay, well, here's the corrective, loving measure of tough love. Abba, daddy, right? Little smack on the butt.
When God flips the script, He can flip it, but boy, it's generally pretty catastrophic.
And it's from a loving God who actually says, we understood this before, with hard times make strong men. Think about World War I and Great Depression, and then World War II, and the Greatest Generation, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of innocent people get swept up in it, and they suffer too. But the maxim of Christianity, as Archbishop Fulton Sheen said, is the innocent pay for the guilty. That was the life of Christ. And many innocent families are suffering who don't deserve to suffer because they didn't ask for any of this. But I think you bring up the most important point is, I wish politicians would think about this, because we could spend all day, financial analysts can spend all day trying to figure out how did this happen and how do we fix this. But if you leave God out of the equation,
exactly.
I mean, God, our world right now, especially America, we are drowning in sin. It is a tidal wave of perversion and filth and evil, and it's overtaking the country, it's overtaking the church. I mean, how can God hold back His hand of wrath? I mean, how?
You say God, God bless America, Joe Biden. Really? Really? You don't even know what that means, Joe. Yeah. And I want to focus this for something. You weren't here in 2002, but you probably remember, I'm sure you guys remember the eastern quarter of the country's power grid went down? Yep. That was down I was driving to the movies with a couple of friends. All of a sudden, the lights on Woodward Avenue just went on. But it was the middle of the day. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody's driving along, but we're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Oh, the lights are out. Oh, you looked across the street and that way, but both sides, and you're like, oh, all the lights are out there too. Just kept driving. It's like, whoa, what's going on? All of a sudden, we're like, hey, there's not going to be power at the movie theater either. So turned around, went back, and it was like, oh, well, the power grid around the Detroit area is not, well known for its stability. I mean, if you sneeze, it goes out somewhere. And but we were sitting there, and I just turned the radio on in the car. I had a truck at the time pickup. We're looking at it, like, oh, it's kind of, oh, this is much larger. Oh, this is this is like the whole, from Chicago over to Maine and down to just north of D.C.
Yeah. Huge.
That's an enormous area, and then spilled over into Canada. And what was interesting, really, was I was like, oh, I should probably go get some gas in the truck. I don't know how long this is going to go. I pull into the gas station. I'm like, oh, the pumps don't work because they're electric. Oh, my. And that went on for 3 days. Mm-hmm. It was eerie. It was like 9/11. There were no planes flying. It was just eerie as can be. It was like, wow, no lights in the neighborhoods. People walking around with flashlights before most people had cell phones that had the lights on them and stuff. There was no way to charge
your cell phone.
You might have had a battery, but then you had to charge that. So, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa. And then all of a sudden, of course, in Detroit, the store looting started on day 3. Fortunately, some of the power started returning on day 4. But you're thinking, oh my goodness, we are about a week away from complete anarchy.
Well, yeah, they say civilization is 3 missed meals away from a riot, from anarchy or like that.
I think that's where the show would actually be going for people is all these black pills on the table here, not just red pills, but black pills, almost like you don't solve the problem with normal means, is the fact that there has to be a spiritual preparation. If you're running out and saying, I just watched the download and it's going to be chaos, I'm going to have to go get a can of beans and I'll be okay. Well, no, that's not our message.
Yeah, that's not the message. That's maybe a little part of the message. But
the fact is, if you will spiritually prepare, which is what the whole reason for the season is, then God would inspire you and urge you, and that little prompting, instead of being paralyzed by fear, you're motivated by the fear of God and so forth, and getting your life in order. And a good priest is going to tell you anyway, every day is a great day in a state of grace, right? And so you can't make redemptive sacrifices if you're not in a state of grace and all this. So the thing is the takeaway message from all of this. We could go on about how things are far more worse than what they are with the ability to hack, and is our own government against us, and blah, 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 okay?
FBI investigating Catholic churches.
Right, that was just on the news today.
Again.
Here we are, still.
So the idea, if you get spiritually prepared, which is the first thing, after seeing the download, go talk to your priest, get straight with God, stop sinning, start praying, go to Mass, that type of thing, and God will be tapping you on the shoulder, and the providence will start, and you will be, and part of that providence may be He's tapping you to save up now. Joseph of Egypt, right? He was told 7 years of famine. He's like, oh, I didn't get paralyzed and go back to bed. He stored up grain for 7 years. Noah, he built an ark. There's a precedent here that says God actually gives you some knowledge about these things, some insights in here, that things could be coming hard. So you will prepare. That's how He is saving you.
And also just going back to this notion of there's a real world impact based on, spiritually, based on a country's spirituality. So Divine Mercy Sunday is coming up, and the saint of Divine Mercy, Saint Faustina, if anybody's read through her, 700-page diary, which I have, there's actually a very disturbing revelation in there where, she had these revelations from Christ. Now, nobody's required to believe them for the faith, but I thought it was very interesting where our Lord revealed to her essentially that the reason that He was holding back he wanted to pour out His wrath upon Poland because at that time it was like the #1 abortion center, capital of Europe, and that it was her prayers that were helping to hold back His wrath. But she died 1939, right? 1939, and then what happened in 1939?
2 months later.
Hitler and Stalin rolled in.
So there are real
Cancers are rolling across the border.
geopolitical consequences to our sin, to a nation's sin, and we have to take that seriously.
Yeah, and I think another thing, to kind of build on what both of you have said, that I've spoken about some of these things like the excessive use of credit cards is my view. It's a spiritual malaise, the desire for something rather than it's something for nothing. I have free money, give me, and I'll we'll pay the piper later. But if you, as a Christian, as a Catholic, are trying to live your life in a more intense way, more intensely spiritual, more intensely Catholic, and you're engaging in evangelization, you're trying to help others see the world that way, well, okay, now you've got you and a group of other people, and they're going to go along and they're going to make people in it build. And you've actually got people who, yes, they have this spiritual engagement with God. Yes, they're holding back the wrath of God. There's that spiritual component. But also there's a practical component that these people... Catholicism is not just a purely spiritually good religion. It is a practically good religion. All of the stuff that Catholicism teaches you it teaches you these natural, normal virtues that if you practice, these people who are absolutely tanking the economy, who are ruining everything, who are messing it up, who are making all these mistakes, who are greedy and all of that, these people are not spiritually good. If they were, they would not be they would not be engaging in these naturally immoral things.
Right.
That's the whole point. So yeah, you actually learn this natural morality. And even if you want to say to an atheist, dude, okay, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in this supernatural aspect of it, but you've got to admit that this 2,000-year-old church really has got it right on so many things in the natural level.
I need to just correct myself very quickly. She died in 1938. But almost 1 year to the day after she died, Poland was invaded.
Right. We have the economic impact of the natural and supernatural evil of abortion. Back in 2009, I believe it was, we did the cost of abortion.
Which is on the site?
It's on the site. You can watch it. It was we had I believe at the time, I can't remember exactly. I think we had added up the populations of various states, and this is again 14 years ago. I think it was 13 or 14 states' populations had been wiped out by abortion. That was then. I mean, I'm sure it's much more than that now, obviously. And you look at what's going on the natural level with abortion, you're destroying your future generations. Right. I mean, all of these countries in Europe are like, oh gosh, we've goofed here. Quit here. Here's 20,000 rubles. Here's this. Start having babies. And nobody is. No. They're not taking the money because they've been conditioned spiritually in the practical level to completely ignore any of that. It's all about me. The entire thing is you God, neighbor, none of it matters. That cannot continue. It simply cannot continue.
And that throws right into the show. You have an economic imbalance. You have a top-heavy society. We're all drawing on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and no one's paying into that. That's just the simple economics of that, and the whole thing is going to fall. So 1,000 different ways. But we could have done this same show on the problems in the church. Let's roll back to 2018 and the problems in government. Let's go back to 2020 and 2022. In 2018, Trump was in charge, and it was a summer of shame. We got the pedos on the run in the church, and things. RICO's coming, and we're going to make a difference. And we really thought there was hope there, right? In 2019, and that kind of all got squelched, the Vatican stepped in November, right? The bishops meeting. They said you can't talk, right? And it was like, whoa, wait a minute, what happened there? And then the sham sex summit in Rome with Supich.
February, 2 months later.
Okay, February of
Supich in charge of a sex summit in Rome.
I mean, you can't even write that. So then it was like, whoa, wait a minute. Well, we still got RICO. Trump's going to fix the church, right? And then 2020 happened. The Trump train couldn't catch Biden in his basement for whatever reason. We're not going to go there, but for whatever reason. And it's like, wait a minute, things aren't getting better in the church. How can they get better in the church?
Or anything.
And how are things going to get better in the government? I thought we had this in the bag. And now, you only got 3 triangles in a stool. And you got religion and politics, and those 2 legs already broke off, and now you're sitting here on the culture, which is driven by economics, and we're telling you here today that leg is cracking.
It's about to go.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
So where do you go? And this is why, if you weren't upset about what happened in the church, you ain't got time for politics, you got time for economics. What's it going to take to get you to go back to confession, to get yourself straight with God? Because you may not have a whole lot of time to do that before things get really dark.
Yeah, well, as we've said so many times, as the church goes, so goes the world. And if we see that the world is going to hell, well, it's because the church, I mean, the bishops primarily are supposed to be they're supposed to be the sentinels standing guard against the influx of evil. They're supposed to be the ones protecting the rest of the flock, and yet many of them are allowing the evil to come. Some of them are even inviting it in. All you have to look is the German bishops.
More than
oh yeah, the German bishops, promoting homosexual unions and saying screw you to the magisterium and the Pope and all of that, and saying we're going to do our own thing. I can easily see other bishops' conferences possibly following the lead. I mean, look at the way the church is going.
Yeah.
When you look at the sort of the survey of the deterioration, I don't know where you go. And there's a fellow I follow on Twitter. I can't remember his name right now, but like every third day he posts a picture of some like horrible scene of something, like some destitution, blown up, some bombed out buildings in Chicago or whatever. And he says his line is, "Nobody is coming to save you." That's a great line. I'm not talking about spiritually. Obviously, our Lord is that spiritually, but on the natural plane, no one is coming to save you. So get this notion out of your head. And what has been conditioned, think about that outrage of the Trump judge getting, shouted down in Stanford. And, they gave the little, oh, you shouldn't do that. We'll put you on paid leave for a little bit until the media goes away, and then we'll restore you to your stuff. There's this drilling, this propaganda going on in young people's minds at colleges and now all over social media and everything else, that you get to do whatever the hell you want. And your opinion is just as valid as someone else's opinion, regardless of what it's about. You can't run a country like that. You can't run a world like that. You can't run a civilization like that. The idea, even in the church, let's hand out surveys to people who don't go to mass and don't believe anything about the faith, and ask them what they think about the faith. Oh, it says right here we need to promote homosexuality. NFT babies, those fine. Oh yeah, those you won't have to go to mass anymore. Those 10 Commandments really. Let's cross them out, make them options. All right, so let's build a synod around that and start doing it. Look, guys, I just don't. I'm not as optimistic as Simon, I'll tell you. I'm not. I don't. There's no way this ends well. Now, what happens economically? I think your point's well taken, Brad. That there's nothing left to fall apart at this point.
Yeah, I mean, one of the on my show Forward Boldly, one of the things I like to do is highlight certain historical events, and not because this is interesting history. It's to let people know, look, this, like the French Revolution, this didn't happen that long ago. It's just about 200 years ago.
200 years ago.
And this could really happen here. Look at the way the Catholics were treated here. They were slaughtered. I mean, absolutely slaughtered. It was totally demonic. And this could happen here. So look at the way that the saints dealt with it back then. Look at the way the Carmelites of Compiègne dealt with it back then. We can look to them for inspiration. The Cristeros in Mexico, that was like a century ago.
Right.
I mean, look, it could very easily come here to the United States. I see it actually coming here sooner than people think. People need to open their eyes and start being prepared.
I mean, six Christians were killed in Tennessee by an anti-Christian. I mean, that's...
And the media is barely condemning
Well, the media is barely covering
Kamala
They're
said,
coddling the,
Kamala Harris said, we have to be very careful with, not offend the transgenders. We can't talk about that.
Yeah. Well, but that is, that's the reality. Brad sort of mentioned, we've got the war, and obviously you're kind of drawn into Ukraine. I mean, I think looking at this notion of we're going to be punished with war and with famine and all these kind of things. Well, war isn't just necessarily, okay, we formally declared a war and there's bunches of guys in uniform coming down and there's tanks rolling down Main Street. War is really that whole sense of just pervasive violence within society that we have, and there's obviously many reasons for that. I mean, one of the ones you and I have discussed this, Brad, about the fatherlessness. I mean, but that's a whole other download, really, to discuss that.
But it's a war.
But what it is the pervasive violence that is occurring, and not just shootings and murders, but just the level of just kind of people punching each other and shoving each other and this sort of stuff. And you see these videos all the time.
And there's stuff shoving people on subway platforms, and trains.
The whole thing. And I think this is a thing that we've had this breakdown of society. And again, I don't necessarily know if I'm optimistic about it. I think I'm somewhat economically optimistic about not losing the reserve currency status, but that's a very narrow thing, really, isn't it?
A bit of a Pyrrhic victory.
Oh, we kept our reserve currency status. Look at that. Take the victory. But I think
the hammer and sickle are going up over the White House.
But I think there is a very there's a path that individuals can follow and need to follow, which is what I'm banging on about all the time in my show, Hardline, which is how individual Catholics need to not be complacent, need to not have this mindset of thank you, Lord, that I'm not like that tax collector, but rather, what do I need to do in order to become a better Catholic, a better person? What do I need to do in order to be saved and be deeper into the faith? What changes do I need to make? And it's no good saying, well, I don't abort, well, I don't contracept, well, I'm not gay. Okay, fine, nobody cares. What the issue is what can you do to address all of these crises?
I think the key word here is subsidiarity. Take it down to its grassroots level. And I'm going to tell you, we've done downloads in the past where we talked about the people who knew their faith. They were the ones that found it out themselves. They were the ones that actually went on the internet and learned it themselves. There was like 4% who really knew their faith because they studied it. They looked at it. They didn't say, well, my pastor never talked about that. Really, in 45 minutes on Sunday, you think you're supposed to get the whole faith taught you right there. My catechism teacher didn't teach that. That's the person's not even Catholic teaching you. Why are you in, you know, silver burdette catechism,
That
right?
includes in the seminaries.
Okay, right, in the seminaries. I'm telling you, we had to do far more studying on our own than you ever got in the classroom, and half of it was to find out if the professor was even off base, right? So subsidiarity, are you learning the faith yourself? Are you taking responsibility for that? Are you actually teaching your family these values, or are you letting them turn into mainstream media, lamestream media, samestream media? Are you actually looking to provide for your family in hard times? What if the grid goes down? I mean, I was standing in line during COVID, and the stores were empty and all this type of stuff. And at that point, I was like, I don't think I want to do this again. So you build up a little home pantry, get some beans on the shelf and some rice, whatever else. And you
learn how to bake bread like me.
Absolutely. And it's actually wonderful.
Very good bread.
Wonderful
No, her
thing.
bread is really good.
But that subsidiarity on each aspect of your life, take charge again. That's what these people back in the Greatest Generation did. We had a war here and a war here, and in between we didn't have much, and they saved everything, you know, and they scrimped and all that. You know, this little bit of yarn.
My dad and his brothers, that old classic story, sold apples on the street corner during the Great Depression. My dad was born, like I said, the day the Great Depression began, and by the time he was 7, he was out there with his older brothers selling apples on the street corner.
That would require this generation to learn the value of work.
Yeah,
to actually value hard work.
Yeah, I think you can say, to your point earlier, Christine, the tidal wave of sin. I just think the waters have gotten so high that whatever corrective action, you know, the little expression of God flipping the script, that has to be severe. Now, whether it's God going, that's it, I've had enough, or, hey, I've just set the natural world in its proper place, and when you go that far outside of the bounds, it's going to correct you. That's just how it is. The rubber band comes flying back at you.
That's one of the ways I think that God punishes us. It's not some active, like, I'm going to smite you, but I'm just going to let you experience the consequences of your actions, and that's what's happening now.
There are two kinds of people in the world. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, thy will be done.
Yeah, that's the frightening one, when you get your own will being done there. And that, you know, bringing it back to an approved apparition, Akita, and the fire. Now, is that just, every day it seems like I'm reading another meteorite, oh, near miss, oh, meteorite went by, comet, oh, wow, is that one going to hit us or not? It's almost every day. It was crazy. I've never experienced that in my life before. But you can almost find that every day. And then also the fire of hypersonic, you know, nuclear missiles that come flying at Mach 15 and make sharp turns. You can't defend against them. So that fire, we actually can understand that. So get yourself straight with God. You don't know how much time you have, and He's going to guide you. Do it on your own subsidiarity, grassroots level.
Get in a state of sanctifying grace supernaturally. Remain in that state. Get beans in your pantry, and make sure your vehicle is filled with gas.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to wrap up right now, folks. And as we always do, wrap up the show with a prayer. We'd invite you to please join us in that. So I'm going to pray this Salve Regina in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus, exules filii Eve. Ad te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte. Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O
clemens, O pia, O dulcis
Virgo Maria. Amen.
Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much for joining us for the download here. Guys, this has been the premiere. It just came up pretty well. We took a really tough subject here and made it very Catholic.
I mean, we did, yeah.
And said, this is what we got to do. Yeah. All right, guys, so that's very much. Thank you for joining us. Let us know. Put your comments in. Tell us what you thought of it. You know, economics, it's glazy, it's horrible, it's all of that. But, you know, this is the world we're in right now. So for all of us up here, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you here tomorrow. This airs Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And before we go, a quick reminder to sign up for the men's conference, Strength and Honor Men's Conference, first weekend of August. So you can sign up on the website, August 4th through August 6th. And the theme is Stay on Board the Ship. You just scroll down the events page on the website, and you will find it there. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.